The galaxy had been at peace for centuries, or so the empires claimed. The universe was governed by the iron grip of the Roveran Dominion, an ancient alien empire that ruled over countless planets with a force that crushed any notion of rebellion. Their advanced technology, ruthless military, and superior intellect had made them the dominant force in the galaxy. No species, no matter how brave, dared to challenge their reign. That was until humanity arrived on the galactic stage. The Earthborn had been late to the Galactic Party, their technological advancements mere centuries old compared to the Dominion's eons of development. But what the Roverans couldn't predict was the one thing that set humans apart: their primal instincts. The species' unyielding drive to survive against impossible odds, their insatiable thirst for freedom, and their fierce, undying loyalty to each other were forces no amount of alien technology could account for. Captain Rachel Thorne was the embodiment of this primal drive. A former soldier turned rogue, she had fought in countless skirmishes against the Dominion's forces, each battle pushing her and her crew closer to the edge of extinction. Her ship, the Vanguard, was a symbol of humanity's defiance, a ragtag fleet of soldiers, explorers, and survivors who had all come together to fight for one cause: freedom. It was on a nameless, forgotten world, deep in the Outer Rim, where Rachel's crew stumbled upon a secret that would ignite the spark of rebellion. While scavenging the ruins of an ancient city, they uncovered a data core, buried beneath centuries of dust. The core was unlike anything they had seen before. A map, yes, but not of stars or planets. It was a map to the Dominion's greatest weapon, the Harbinger, an ancient starship said to possess power so immense that it could reshape the galaxy in the blink of an eye. For the first time, the Vanguard had a true target. With the Harbinger in their sights, they could finally strike at the heart of the Dominion's empire. But it wasn't just the ship they would have to deal with. They had to outwit the Dominion's all-seeing intelligence network, evade its fleets of battle-hardened soldiers, and face the wrath of the Roveran Empress herself, a being whose mind was as cold as the void of space. Rachel knew that bringing the fight to the Dominion would be the ultimate test of humanity's survival instinct, but she also knew something that the Dominion could never understand. Humans didn't fight because they thought they could win. They fought because they had to. And when there was no other choice but to survive, humanity had an uncanny way of overcoming impossible odds. As the Vanguard made its way back to their hidden base on the moon of a dead planet, the crew gathered around the holographic table, each one keenly aware of the danger they were about to face. There was no going back. They had the map, but the road ahead was paved with peril. Rachel's first officer, Jackson, looked at the table, then to her. "You really think we can do this?" he asked. Rachel's eyes flickered to the distant stars visible through the viewport. The silence in the room was thick, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the silence before the storm, the calm before the chaos that would come. Finally, she spoke, her voice calm but resolute. "We don't have a choice, Jackson. We either make our stand now, or we're nothing more than slaves to an empire that never cared about us. We're not just fighting for ourselves anymore. We're fighting for every human being in the galaxy." Her words carried weight, not just in the room, but across the stars. The crew nodded in agreement, each of them feeling the gravity of the decision they had just made. The Vanguard would be the spark that lit the fire of rebellion, but it would take more than just a handful of brave souls to topple the Dominion. Humanity's primal instincts would be their greatest weapon: survival, unity, and the will to fight, no matter the cost. And so, the crew of the Vanguard set course for the heart of the Roveran Dominion, ready to face the impossible. With the Harbinger within their grasp, they would become a force no empire, no matter how powerful, could ignore. As the Vanguard cruised through the dense, uncharted sectors of space toward the heart of Roveran territory, the crew's tension grew palpable. Their mission was a gamble: one wrong move, one signal broadcasted at the wrong moment, and the entire Dominion fleet would be on their tail. But the data core they had recovered had promised something extraordinary: the Harbinger, a weapon of unimaginable power, hidden in the farthest reaches of the galaxy. With it, humanity could shift the balance of power forever. Rachel knew the stakes. Failure wasn't an option. But even with the strength of their instincts and the unity that bound them together, they were still just a small, unarmed ship against the might of an empire that spanned entire galaxies. The Dominion's intelligence network, known as the Veil, was designed to find and eliminate threats before they could strike. Their operatives were everywhere, listening, watching, waiting. And the Vanguard was now a target. Lieutenant Kira Flynn, the ship's tactical officer, was the first to break the silence as they entered Dominion-controlled space. "Captain," she said, her voice steady but with a hint of worry, "we've detected multiple enemy patrols in the vicinity. If we don't change course, we'll be spotted." Rachel stood at the command deck, looking at the star maps flickering in front of her. They were close, too close. "How many ships are we talking about?" "At least 5 destroyers, Captain," Kira replied, her fingers dancing across the holographic display. "And they're closing in fast." A low hum vibrated through the Vanguard's hull as Rachel turned to face her crew. They were in hostile territory now, and their instincts would be tested in ways they hadn't yet imagined. To avoid detection, they would have to make a split-second decision, one that could determine whether they lived or died. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers," Rachel ordered. "Jackson, get us into the nebula field nearby. We'll use the gas clouds to mask our signature." Jackson, the ship's first officer, immediately took to the navigation controls. "Aye, Captain. Hold on tight." As the ship veered toward the nebula, the crew braced themselves for the rough ride ahead. The clouds of gas and dust provided natural cover, but they were also treacherous, filled with gravimetric anomalies that could tear a ship apart if navigated incorrectly. Yet, Rachel knew their only hope was to rely on their instincts and Jackson's skill at the helm. The Vanguard shot into the nebula, its sensors flickering in and out of range as the thick mists of cosmic dust cloaked their ship. Outside the viewports, the stars blurred into a swirling mass of lights and shadows. For a moment, it seemed as if they had vanished from the Dominion's radar. But then, the faintest signal appeared on their sensors, a Dominion warship, just outside the nebula's edge, its massive hull casting a dark silhouette against the chaotic backdrop of space. "We've been spotted," Kira said, her voice sharp with urgency. "They're closing in on us." The Dominion ship, the Rovar's Wrath, was one of the most feared vessels in the fleet. Its weapons were formidable, and its sensors nearly infallible. If they couldn't shake it off, the Vanguard wouldn't stand a chance. Rachel's heart raced, but her mind remained clear. The crew's survival instincts had kicked in, and she knew they had one shot to escape. They needed to move fast. "Jackson, I need you to make an impossible maneuver," Rachel said, her voice calm but commanding. "Get us through that asteroid belt. It's our only chance." The asteroid belt was a dangerous, unpredictable obstacle, shifting fields of rock and debris with little room for error. But Rachel had seen the crew do the impossible before, and she knew that the one thing the Dominion couldn't replicate was the human will to survive. Jackson didn't hesitate. He slammed the thrusters into full power, angling the Vanguard toward the asteroid field. The ship's engines roared, and the crew felt the jolt of acceleration as the asteroid debris flashed before them in a deadly dance. The Rovar's Wrath followed, its weapons firing in quick bursts, narrowly missing as the Vanguard darted through the maze of rocks. Every twist, every turn, felt like a heartbeat, like they were dancing with death itself. But the Vanguard's crew were more than just survivors. They were determined. "You're crazy, Captain," Kira yelled, but there was respect in her voice. She knew Rachel had a plan. They all did. As the asteroid field became more chaotic, Rachel made her move. "Jackson, take us into that ion storm. It'll fry their sensors." Jackson's fingers flew over the controls, adjusting course with impossible precision. The ion storm was a turbulent region of charged particles that could overwhelm even the most advanced technology. It would cripple the Rovar's Wrath's systems, but it would also push the Vanguard to the limit. "We're going to burn through this," Rachel said, her voice steady despite the danger. "Hold tight." The ship plunged into the heart of the ion storm, sparks of electricity arcing across the hull. For a brief moment, The crew was engulfed in darkness, the only light coming from the flash of energy outside the ship. When the storm passed, the rovar's wrath was gone. The Vanguard had survived. But as the crew looked around, the reality of what they had just done set in. They had made their first real escape, but they were now deeper in Dominion space than they'd ever dared venture before. Rachel turned to her crew, the fire in her eyes never dimming. "We've just sent a message to the Dominion," she said, her voice laced with determination. "We're not just a threat. We're a force they can't ignore." The silence that followed their escape into the ion storm was almost deafening. The Vanguard had slipped through the grasp of the Dominion, but not without leaving a mark. The risk of being caught again was higher now, and Rachel knew they needed to plan their next move carefully. They had survived the immediate threat, but the shadow of the Dominion loomed larger with every passing moment. The crew gathered in the war room, a dimly lit chamber deep within the heart of the Vanguard. The walls were covered in holographic maps of Roveran space, each one filled with red circles marking the locations of Dominion patrols, supply lines, and most importantly, the Harbinger's last known position. But no matter how many times Rachel and Kira pored over the data, it seemed the closer they got to their goal, the more elusive it became. "We're running out of time," Kira said, her voice tight with frustration. "The Dominion will know we're here soon. They've got the veil, and they're already hunting us. We can't keep running forever." Rachel's mind was racing, the weight of the crew's survival pressing down on her. The crew was tired, their morale strained from constant evasion, but they had come too far to falter now. There was no turning back. "We have one option left," Rachel said, standing tall and drawing their attention. "But it's risky, even by our standards. We need to find someone who knows the Dominion inside and out, someone who can help us find the Harbinger and avoid getting wiped out in the process." Jackson, who had been silent until now, raised an eyebrow. "You don't mean—" "I do," Rachel confirmed, her gaze steady. "We need to find the ghost of Varen." The ghost of Varen was a name whispered in the darkest corners of the galaxy, a former Roveran general who had defected decades ago, vanishing without a trace. He was a legend, a ghost. No one knew his true identity, but the stories spoke of his unmatched knowledge of Dominion strategy, his ruthlessness, and his desire to see the Empire burn. Many had tried to find him over the years, but he was elusive, like a phantom in the void. But Rachel wasn't looking for a mythical hero. She was looking for the one person who could help them make their move against the Dominion. If anyone knew how to outsmart the Veil and track the Harbinger, it was him. The crew's skepticism was palpable, but Rachel's resolve was unwavering. "He's out there," she said, her voice low but certain. "And if we find him, we'll have the edge we need." The search for the ghost of Varen led them to a place few would dare venture, a black market station known as Nyx Station. Tucked away in the shadow of a dead star, the station was a haven for smugglers, mercenaries, and anyone willing to pay the price for information or weapons. As the Vanguard approached Nyx Station, the crew braced themselves for what awaited. They had no idea who they would find there or what it would cost to convince the ghost of Varen to join their cause. But desperation had a way of cutting through uncertainty, and Rachel knew that without this alliance, their mission was doomed. Nyx Station was a sprawling labyrinth of shadowy corridors and dimly lit marketplaces, its walls lined with illicit technology, weapons, and an array of faces from every corner of the galaxy. The atmosphere was tense, thick with suspicion. A sense of danger lingered in the air, but it was the kind of place where danger was simply part of the environment, where trust was a currency few could afford. Rachel led her crew through the winding alleys, each step echoing with the sound of footsteps from strangers who watched them with wary eyes. The station's denizens were known for their loyalty to no one but themselves, but there was one person who might have the information they needed. They reached the station's central hub, a small, hidden cantina where the more discreet deals were made. It was a place where whispered conversations could turn deadly, and the sharpest minds could be bought or sold for the right price. Sitting at the back of the cantina was a man cloaked in a dark, flowing robe. His face was obscured, but there was no mistaking the air of authority that surrounded him. The rumors about the ghost of Aaron had been enough to give Rachel the courage to approach. "Are you the one they call the ghost?" Rachel asked, her voice cutting through the murmur of the cantina. The man didn't flinch, didn't look up. He merely took a slow sip from his drink before responding. "Who's asking?" His voice was cold, with an edge that matched the atmosphere of the station. Rachel moved closer, her crew standing behind her, ready for anything. "I am Captain Rachel Thorne of the Vanguard. We've come for your help. The Dominion is after us, and we need your knowledge to destroy them." The man's eyes finally met hers, sharp and calculating. There was a long silence, as if he was weighing her words carefully. Then he smiled, a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "And why would I help you?" he asked, his tone more curious than hostile. "The Dominion has far more resources than you. What makes you think you can succeed where so many have failed?" Rachel didn't hesitate. "Because we're not like them. We fight to survive. And if you want the galaxy to burn, help us ignite the fire." The ghost studied her for a moment longer before leaning back in his chair, his hands steepled together. "I've been waiting for someone like you," he said, his voice lowering. "The Dominion may be a machine, but they underestimate one thing: the will of a species to fight when cornered. If you can prove yourself worthy, then yes, I'll help you. But be warned, Captain. If you make one mistake, you'll be the first to burn." Rachel nodded, understanding the price of failure all too well. She had no illusions about the stakes, but with the ghost of Aaron by their side, the Vanguard had taken its first step toward making their mission a reality. The road ahead was fraught with danger, but one thing was certain: the time for running was over. The alliance with the ghost of Aaron marked a turning point in the crew's mission. The ghost, who had spent decades in the shadows, navigating the labyrinthine web of Dominion politics and warfare, was a treasure trove of information. His knowledge of the Dominion's inner workings, strategies, and secrets was unmatched. But he was not one to give away his knowledge freely. Every word, every piece of advice, came at a price, sometimes more than the Vanguard's crew was willing to pay. Rachel and her crew had learned quickly that the ghost wasn't a hero or a savior. He was a survivor, like them, and survival often meant making deals with the darker side of the galaxy. As they sat around the war table in the cantina, Rachel's mind was already working through the options the ghost had laid out. "You've got the map to the Harbinger," the ghost said, his voice a gravelly whisper, "but you'll never get to it unless you understand the Dominion's next move. Their fleet is spread thin across multiple sectors, but they've begun reinforcing their most vulnerable positions. A strike at the right time could cause enough chaos to give you an opening." Rachel's eyes narrowed. "What's the catch?" The ghost smirked. "The catch, Captain, is that the Dominion isn't just a military machine. It's a political one, too. To reach the Harbinger, you'll need to outmaneuver both their fleets and their politicians. You'll need to take out key officers, people whose loss would send the whole system into disarray." Jackson leaned forward. "You want us to assassinate Dominion officials? You're asking for a full-scale war." The ghost's smile faded, replaced by an expression of cold calculation. "Not a war. A spark. A single assassination of a high-ranking officer would send the Vale into a frenzy. Their surveillance would collapse, leaving their fleets vulnerable. The chaos would give you the opening to strike at the Harbinger. If you succeed, the Dominion will implode from within." Rachel exchanged a glance with her officers. They all understood what was being asked of them. This wasn't just about finding the Harbinger anymore. It was about dealing a decisive blow to the heart of the Dominion. But the cost of failure? It would be catastrophic. "We're not assassins," Rachel said, her voice steady but firm. "We're freedom fighters." The ghost gave her a knowing look. "Sometimes, Captain, survival means becoming something you're not. The Dominion is a beast that will not be tamed with honor. But if you want to survive, you'll have to become the shadows. The Vanguard will be your weapon, but you'll need to fight with everything you've got." Rachel's resolve hardened. She had been faced with impossible odds before, but now she was tasked with not just surviving, but leading an insurgency that could shift the galaxy's balance forever. The weight of that responsibility settled on her shoulders like 1,000 tons of steel, but she would bear it. For humanity. For her crew. "I'll do it," she said, her voice unwavering. We'll take the fight to them. But we'll do it our way. We won't become the monsters we're fighting against." The ghost gave a short nod. Wise words. But remember, Captain, the road you're walking now doesn't allow for mistakes.
Make sure your crew is prepared.
The Dominion won't go down easily, and neither will their generals. The next few days were spent preparing for the mission that would decide the fate of their rebellion. The Vanguard's crew worked tirelessly, training, strategizing, and equipping themselves for a mission unlike any they had undertaken before. The Harbinger was within their reach, but to get to it, they would first have to take down a key figure, General Vrax, one of the Dominion's most ruthless and calculating commanders. General Vrax was a legend in his own right, a tactician so brilliant that the Dominion had made him the head of their war effort. He was known for his ability to anticipate every move his enemies made, for his cold, precise calculations, and for his utter lack of mercy. If they were to defeat the Dominion, he had to die. But getting close to Vrax was no simple task. His flagship, the Vraxian Scourge, was a fortress of a ship, surrounded by layers of security and heavily guarded. The plan was simple in theory. Infiltrate the Vraxian Scourge while it was docked at a heavily fortified space station, eliminate General Vrax, and escape before the Dominion's forces could retaliate. But Rachel knew that simplicity could be a death sentence in a mission like this. The Vanguard had no illusions about what they were up against. They would be walking into the lion's den. "We have one shot at this," Kira said as she went over the mission details with the crew. "Vrax isn't just a commander. He's the cornerstone of the Dominion's military. Taking him out will create a ripple effect. But if we fail, the veil will be onto us before we even leave the station." Rachel stood at the front of the briefing room, her gaze unwavering. "We don't fail," she said simply. "We've survived this long by outsmarting the enemy. And we'll do it again." Jackson, always the voice of reason, spoke up. "Captain, I'll pilot the shuttle. We'll need precision timing, and I know I can get us in and out fast. But we'll be on our own once we're inside." Rachel nodded. "You'll have backup. Kira, you and Jackson will disable the security grid while the rest of us handle the extraction. We'll strike fast, hit hard, and vanish before they even know we were there." As the crew prepared for the mission, the weight of their upcoming task bore down on them. General Vrax was more than just a target. He was a symbol of everything the Dominion stood for: brutal, efficient, merciless. And to bring him down would mean a direct challenge to the heart of the Empire. But Rachel had learned something in all her years of fighting. When you fight for survival, you don't just target the enemy, you target their foundations. And General Vrax was the foundation of the Dominion's military might. Without him, the Empire would crumble. It was time to strike. The night before the mission, the crew gathered in the Vanguard's briefing room. The tension was palpable, the weight of what they were about to undertake settling over them like a heavy fog. General Vrax wasn't just another target. He was the cornerstone of the Dominion's military strategy. Without him, the Dominion's grip on the galaxy would falter, and for the crew of the Vanguard, the opportunity to strike at the heart of that empire was a chance they couldn't afford to waste. Rachel stood before them, eyes scanning her crew. Her voice was steady, but intense. "This mission is critical. We're not just taking down a general. We're sending a message. We've been cornered, hunted, and underestimated by the Dominion. But we're still here, and we're going to show them what happens when you push humans too far." Kira nodded, her gaze sharp. "The space station where Vrax's ship is docked is heavily fortified. Once we board, we'll be in a hornet's nest. We need to hit hard, disrupt their command, and then vanish before they can retaliate." Jackson, the steady presence in the room, leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "I'll get us in. The station's defenses are formidable, but they won't expect us to come in on the shadow side, where their sensors are weakest. We'll slip in, disable their security, and the rest of you can do your job. Once we're inside, we're on our own," Rachel said, her eyes hardening with resolve. "We move fast. Vrax's flagship, the Vraxian Scourge, is where he'll be. We take him out, then extract. No hesitation. The crew nodded in agreement. They had been in tight spots before, but this was different. The mission was not just about survival anymore. It was about giving the galaxy hope and striking a blow that would reverberate across the stars. They couldn't afford to fail. The Vanguard slipped into the station's outer perimeter under the cover of darkness, its stealth systems keeping it hidden from the watchful eyes of Dominion sensors. Jackson maneuvered the ship with expert precision, weaving through the debris fields surrounding the station. The Vanguard's small size allowed it to remain undetected, but it would only be a matter of time before the Dominion realized something was amiss. They had no time to waste. As they docked at an unused maintenance bay on the far side of the station, the crew prepared for the hardest part of the mission, infiltrating the heart of the Dominion's fortress without alerting anyone. Kira, Jackson, and a small team of elite soldiers were tasked with disabling the station's security systems. They would have to bypass firewalls, disable cameras, and neutralize any sentries without leaving a trace. The rest of the crew, Rachel, Flynn, and a few others, would make their way to the Vraxian Scourge, infiltrate the command center, and assassinate General Vrax. "Stay sharp," Rachel said, her voice low as she gave her final instructions before they split off into their groups. "We move like shadows. One wrong move, and we're dead." The station's corridors were a maze of cold steel and artificial lights, a labyrinth designed to confuse and isolate. As they moved deeper into the heart of the facility, the crew felt the weight of the mission pressing down on them. Every step they took could be their last. Kira led the charge, her tactical instincts taking over as she guided the team through the narrow hallways. She used her hacking tools to silently disable the station's internal security, sending false readings to Dominion surveillance. Each camera and sensor they bypassed brought them closer to their goal, but the closer they got, the more the air seemed to thicken with danger. There were no alarms yet, but Rachel knew the longer they stayed undetected, the better their chances of success. Jackson, on the other hand, was already working with his team to infiltrate the main hangar, where the Vraxian Scourge was docked. He worked quickly and methodically, using every trick in the book to evade the Dominion's defenses. The ship, massive and imposing, loomed before them as they snuck into the docking bay. The plan was simple: breach the ship, eliminate Vrax's inner circle, and then take out the general himself. It would be a quick strike, one that required precision and efficiency. But nothing ever went exactly as planned. Inside the command center of the Vraxian Scourge, Vrax sat in his chair, the dim light of the screens reflecting off his cold, calculating face. His fingers moved deftly over the controls, his mind constantly analyzing the shifting patterns of the galaxy, anticipating the next move of his enemies. He was always 10 steps ahead. It was what made him so dangerous. "Sir, we've detected a breach," one of his officers reported, his voice tight with alarm. "There's an unauthorized boarding party on the station. They've disabled several security systems, and it looks like they're heading toward your command center." Vrax remained unmoving, his eyes narrowing as he processed the information. "I know," he said quietly, his voice chillingly calm. "Send reinforcements to block all escape routes. And prepare the ship for immediate departure. We will not let them escape alive." As the officer rushed to comply, Vrax turned his gaze to the nearby viewport, watching as the stars outside the station's windows seemed to shift and flicker. It was always like this when someone tried to take him down, a brief moment of chaos, a flash of hope for the enemy, and then the inevitable crushing retaliation. Rachel's team was already inside the command center, weapons drawn, moving swiftly through the halls. As they neared Vrax's chambers, the atmosphere grew tense. The final confrontation was drawing near, and everything hinged on the next few moments. Vrax had anticipated this. He always did. Just as they reached the door to his private quarters, an alarm blared throughout the station. Red lights flashed, and the crew's heart sank. The Dominion was mobilizing faster than they had expected. "We've been compromised," Flynn said, her voice tight. "Vrax knows we're here." Rachel's mind raced. The plan had just shifted from infiltration to full-blown assault. "No turning back," she muttered. "Let's finish this." The door to Vrax's quarters slid open with a hiss, revealing the general standing at his command terminal, already preparing to make his escape. The game of cat and mouse had come to an end. The room exploded with action as the door to Vrax's quarters slid open, revealing the cold, imposing figure of the general. He didn't flinch at the sight of the Vanguard's crew, their weapons raised and aimed directly at him. There was no sign of fear, no hint of hesitation in his gaze. General Vrax was a man who had seen it all, a man who never lost control. And he wasn't about to start now. Rachel's heart pounded in her chest as she stepped forward, her gun aimed directly at Vrax. "End of the line, Vrax," she said, her voice cold. "Surrender now and we'll make it quick. Fight back, and you won't live to see another star." Vrax's lips curled into a thin smile, but there was no warmth in it. He turned slowly to face her, his eyes glinting with a dangerous intelligence. "You think you can kill me, Captain?" His voice was calm, almost amused. "You're playing a game you don't understand." Rachel didn't flinch. "Maybe. But you're running out of time." Vrax's eyes flickered to the control panel beside him, where a red light blinked steadily. A countdown. A dozen heavily armed Dominion soldiers stormed into the room, weapons raised. They had anticipated the breach. They had expected a fight. But Rachel's crew was ready. "We'll see about that," Flynn said, the tension in the air snapping like a live wire. The firefight that followed was brutal, fast, and unforgiving. The crew of the Vanguard fought with everything they had, their movements coordinated and efficient, honed by years of surviving impossible odds. Vrax's soldiers, though well-trained, were no match for the raw determination of Rachel's team. But even as they fought, Vrax remained an imposing figure, his eyes never leaving Rachel, his presence still commanding the room. Jackson had been right. The station was collapsing around them, the Dominion reinforcements flooding in from all sides. The mission had shifted from a clean assassination to a desperate fight for survival. The odds were no longer in their favor. "We need to get out of here, now," Kira shouted, ducking behind a console as blaster fire ricocheted off the walls. "The station's about to go into lockdown, and they'll be on us in minutes." Rachel didn't need to be told twice. They were out of time. The only way out was through, and they had one shot at making it out alive. "Take him down," Rachel shouted to her team. "We can't let him escape." With a movement faster than human reflex should allow, Vrax moved towards his command console, activating a series of emergency systems that began locking down the station's exits. But before he could finish, Flynn fired a well-aimed shot, hitting him square in the shoulder. Vrax grunted, but didn't fall. Instead, he turned his attention to the incoming reinforcements, his eyes narrowing. "You'll never make it out," he spat. "I've already called for backup from the Vale. You're dead the moment you leave this room." Rachel's mind raced as the walls seemed to close in around them. They had no time for a prolonged fight. They had to end it here. "We're not done yet," Rachel said through gritted teeth. She turned to Jackson.
"Now."
With expert precision, Jackson fired a disruptor shot at the station's central core, targeting the primary energy conduit that powered the station's lockdown systems. Sparks flew, and the lights flickered as the entire station shuddered under the strain of the attack. The emergency systems began to malfunction, the lockdown procedures halting just long enough for Rachel's crew to make their final push. The moment of distraction was enough. Rachel and Kira advanced, guns drawn, cutting down the remaining soldiers with swift, precise fire. Vrax, now injured but still standing, raised his own weapon, an energy blade that glowed with deadly intensity. "You think you can stop me?" he sneered. "I am the Dominion's future. Without me, you're nothing. All you've done is delay the inevitable." Rachel didn't answer.
She didn't need to.
With a decisive motion, she raised her weapon and fired, the blast hitting Vrax square in the chest, sending him sprawling back against the wall with a sickening thud. For a moment, the room was silent. The only sound was the soft hum of the failing systems around them. Vrax's body slumped to the floor, his weapon slipping from his hand. Rachel exhaled sharply, her mind racing as the gravity of what they'd just accomplished began to settle in. They had taken down the Dominion's most feared general, but the price had been steep. The station was still a death trap, and the Vraxian scourge was ready to launch at any moment. "We've got to move now," Kira shouted, urgency in her voice. That blast triggered a chain reaction. "The station's core is going critical." Rachel nodded, her voice steady but commanding. "Everyone to the extraction point, now." "Jackson, we're leaving." Jackson didn't hesitate, taking the lead as they made their way back through the station's winding corridors. They fought their way through the remaining Dominion soldiers, narrowly avoiding traps and firefights. But their time was running out. As they reached the shuttle bay, Rachel felt a surge of relief. Brief, but welcome. The shuttle was prepped and ready, the engines humming in anticipation of their escape. The crew piled in, but there was no time for celebration. Jackson slammed the throttle forward, the shuttle shooting out of the bay as the station's core began to implode behind them. The station's destruction sent shockwaves through space, but the Vanguard had already broken free, its crew alive, and their mission a success. They had struck at the heart of the Dominion. Vrax was dead, and for the first time in a long while, Rachel felt the spark of hope flicker in her chest. The Vanguard streaked through the stars, its engines pushing it faster and farther from the wreckage of the station. Behind them, the once formidable facility was now a drifting hulk of twisted metal and shattered dreams, its core destabilized and burning with the fury of a dying star. The Dominion's grip on the galaxy had just weakened, but Rachel knew this was only the beginning. The death of General Vrax was a significant blow, but it would take more than one strike to bring down an empire. Rachel stood at the front of the ship's bridge, her eyes focused on the vast expanse of space before her. For a moment, the weight of the mission seemed to lift, the adrenaline of the battle giving way to a fragile sense of triumph. They had done it. They had fought, survived, and struck a blow that would send ripples through the Dominion's war machine. But as the silence settled over the crew, Rachel couldn't shake the feeling that the real fight was just beginning. "You did good, Captain." Jackson's voice broke through the silence, and she turned to see him standing by the console, his face tired but satisfied. Rachel gave him a small smile. "We did it, Jackson. We all did." Kira entered the bridge, her expression steely as always, but there was a slight edge to her demeanor that Rachel couldn't ignore. "We've got a message from the Alliance," she said, handing over a data pad. "They've caught wind of our success. It looks like our little insurgency is about to go galaxy-wide." Rachel accepted the data pad, scanning the message quickly. The Alliance was acknowledging the success of the mission, but with it came a new set of expectations. The Alliance wasn't just a collection of well-meaning factions anymore. They were a movement, a force that could change the galaxy, but only if the crew of the Vanguard could keep the momentum alive. "You know what this means, don't you?" Kira asked, her voice low. "They're going to want us to lead. They're going to want us to make this into something bigger than just one successful strike." Rachel felt the weight of the words sink in. They were no longer a ragtag group of survivors fighting for their lives. They were a symbol. They had ignited a spark in the galaxy, a spark that could turn into a full-blown revolution. But revolution was messy, dangerous, and far from certain. "I know," Rachel said, her voice thoughtful. "But we've come this far. If we want to end the Dominion's reign, we need to keep pushing. And we need to do it together." "Together," Kira echoed, a rare softness in her tone. The ship's alarm suddenly blared, snapping everyone back into reality. They were approaching a new set of coordinates, and the incoming data was alarming. A fleet of Dominion ships, led by the Veil, the Dominion's flagship, was within striking distance. "They're here," Flynn said from the communications console, her voice tense. "The Dominion knows what we did. They're coming for us full force." Rachel felt the weight of the moment settle over her. They had won the battle, but the war was far from over. The Veil was the heart of the Dominion's command structure, and it was coming for them. But this time, the crew of the Vanguard wouldn't run. They had struck a blow against the Dominion, and now it was time to make their stand. "We fight," Rachel said, her voice calm but resolute. "We stand our ground, and we send them a message they won't forget." The crew nodded, a fire igniting in their eyes. They were survivors, yes, but they were also something more now. They were warriors. And they had something the Dominion didn't: the will to fight for a future where humanity could thrive, free from the iron fist of the Empire. Jackson's hands gripped the controls with determination. "We'll make this one count. Let's show them what we're made of." Rachel stood tall as the vanguard prepared for the battle ahead. She didn't know what the future held, or how much longer they could keep up the fight. But she did know one thing: they were no longer alone. The galaxy was watching, and humanity had shown the universe that they would not go quietly into the night. The first spark of rebellion had ignited, and it was unstoppable. The vanguard plunged into the darkness of space, ready to face the Veil and whatever the Dominion had left to throw at them. The fight for the future was just beginning, and Rachel's crew had become the symbol of hope the galaxy desperately needed. And as they surged toward their inevitable confrontation, one thought echoed in Rachel's mind. Human instinct was stronger than any empire. And it would never be defeated.